Hey guys, thanks for taking time to watch a little instructional video about European mounts. A friend of mine recently shot a buck, and it was her first archery buck, and she wanted to do a Euro mount, and so I thought, man, I'll do that mount for you. I need to shoot a video. People are asking me a lot about my mounts that I do myself, and so I thought I might shoot a video. It might be helpful to some. I'm not an expert. This is just something I've done over the years and worked out a system, and I have a few tips that I thought I might share with you that might be helpful. One of the things that you're trying to do with a Euro mount that really makes them look cool is you want a really white skull. The whiter the skull, the cooler the antlers look, the cooler the buck looks. And the thing you have to really be careful with is people cook too long and too hot, and what happens is you lose this nose piece. And this nose piece, man, if it's just like that and you just have that part, it's okay. But this right here just sets it off. It's a really cool piece. Reminds me of the movie Predator for some reason. And so I did all these Euro mounts myself. And I don't always, depending on the size of the buck, whether I do a full shoulder mount, they're expensive. And you can do one of these. They don't hardly cost you anything. Just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of work. Some of the things you're going to need is you're going to need a sharp knife. A utility knife will work. I like to use a scalpel. If I have them, you can buy disposable scalpels. They work great. Or even one of the knives that I got a knife from Tom Miranda. It's a scalpel knife. You can change the blades, and it does a great job. And a pair of pliers, a large pot. I use a turkey cooker. They're pretty cheap, and I don't cook turkeys in them after I use them for this. And you're gonna need some water, a power washer. You don't have to have a power washer. I didn't use a power washer on any of these, but if you do have a power washer or have access to one, it certainly makes it a lot easier. Some rubber gloves for safety and some safety goggles, paper towels, and some swimming pool clarifier. And that's probably the piece that is a lot different for me that I'll share with you. I just kind of stumbled across it and started using it. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. But the first thing you want to do is you want to remove the skin from the head. Now, again, if you harvest a large buck and you're like, man, I want to do a shoulder mount. Well, the problem with that is when I take my mount to the taxidermist, the first one I ever did, I didn't get my mount back for until May. And that's a long time from all the enthusiasm and the excitement to be able to showcase your deer. And so I learned on my second deer from that point forward, I call the taxidermist. I say, hey, I've harvested a great buck. I want you to mount him. If I bring him over, will you cape him out while I wait? And generally they will. It takes them about 10 minutes. They cape him out, keep the hide, send the hide off to the tannery, which is what usually takes so long. I take my antlers home and with the skull, do a Euro mount. I have him with me, and when the hide comes back from the tannery, the taxidermist calls me. I take the Euro mount to the taxidermist. He cuts the skull cap off and fixes him to the model, and I'm only out of my antlers. I don't have them for only about 2 weeks as opposed to half a year. And so you can wait while they cape them, and that's always that works out really well for me, so I'd encourage you to do that. But the first step that you have to do if you're not doing that, if you're not taking them to the taxidermist, is you have to remove the skin from the head. So here I have a cool buck, first archery buck from a friend of mine. And so what I'm going to do is I don't cape them out and try to be real ginger. Unless you want to practice, it's a good opportunity to practice. But I'm just going to cut and skin the head just like I would the rest of the deer, and you have to get all the fur off, and that's really important. You don't want all that fur and that dirt and all that stuff. You don't want that in the water as you're boiling or cooking the head, I should say. I want to say don't boil the head, you cook the head, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. But all you do is just take a sharp knife, a razor, utility knife, pair of pliers, and just get all of the skin off. You don't have to worry about getting any other meat off, just get all the skin off of the skull, and that's the first step. So you can see here I've got my Weeby signature scalpel from Tom Miranda. Pretty cool. Replaceable blades, so you just put the blade in, And I generally will break a couple of these doing this, but the blades are replaceable, so that's cool. Again, disposable scalpels work really good. Just make that incision and just skin the head. That's all you're doing. Once you get the hide off, you get a real grotesque looking skull. Not really pleasant to look at, so the kids won't care anything about that, but it is what it is, and it's part of the process. Okay, so this step is pretty important. What you want to do is you want to take some regular cellophane, some plastic wrap, and all you're going to do is you're going to wrap around the base of the antler. So right here at the base, at the pedestal, not below the pedestal, but at the pedestal, because you want what's below the pedestal, you want to bring the water up as high as you can, but you don't want to go past the pedestal, because then you run the risk during the cooking process of cooking the color off of the base of the antler. So you want the base of the antler to remain the same color that it was in its natural state. So you just kind of wrap a little bit of cellophane, because what will happen is as the head cooks, then it's going to create the fat is going to create some bubbles, and it'll get up around the base of the antler. It's not detrimental if it does. You can wipe it off later, but better safe than sorry. I like to cover it up to provide some protection, and this is also important during the bleaching process that we'll get to later in a later step. So just take a little bit of cellophane, wrap around the base of the antler, and then you'll be ready for the next step. Okay, so then you're going to put the head in the pot. As you can see, the pedestals are well below the surface of the water. They're about 2 to 3 inches below right now, and that's not what I want. So I'll take a couple of boards, and I'll just put them together stacked, and I'll put them across here. Now I know I can do this because the flame on my turkey cooker is not going to get anywhere near these boards. So if they would get near your boards, you need to use whatever safety precautions that you think is necessary to keep your home safe. So now with him sitting right here, I have most of the skull below the surface of the water, but I have about maybe an inch of water on the right and left of each pedestal. I'm just going to take a little of the water out. So we're at a place now that we're good to go on our water and the level of water on the base of the antlers. So I feel pretty good about that. Again, some of the part of the top around the antler, it's kind of a little like fatty tissue a little bit. It's not real meaty. I'll be able to take that off with the power washer. If you don't have a power washer, don't worry. You can scrape that off and use a knife and get it off. It's still going to cook because the water is going to create steam and heat that's going to cook it off of the skull, and you can get it off after the cooking process. I'm now ready to add heat. Now let me tell you something. This is extremely important. You are not boiling the head. Like we are guilty, all hunters are guilty of saying, I got to boil the head out. I say it. But I'm trying to be real intentional of saying, we're cooking, not boiling. We're cooking the head until the meat releases. We are not boiling the head. If you boil the head, you will get it too hot, and their nose pieces will fall off, and you'll end up trying to glue them back together, and it just won't look as good. And I think also when you boil it too hot, I think you cook some of the color that's in the water into the skull, and we don't want that. So cooking is all about timing and temperature. Great cooks know that it's about timing and temperature, and so you want to think slow and low. Cook real slow and keep your heat real low. You don't want a rolling boil. You want just to simmer, like a bubble every once in a while coming up as it's cooking the meat, but not a rolling boil. So remember, It's all about timing and temperature. Cook slow and low. The process will take about 7 hours. A lot of times what I'll do, like I'm starting this one, it's about 5 o'clock. I'll leave him on until I go to bed at like 10:30 or 11. I'll just leave him soaking in the water. I'll get up and check it in the morning, see how it looks. If I don't feel like it's completely done, I'll fire it back up and run it another hour or two. And so usually about like 7 hours, maybe even less, just as if you're monitoring it. Now this is a real important part of the process. I'll come out every 1.5 to 2 hours and I'll check it during that time period. Just like you're cooking anything else, you add water. Because the water is going to vaporize, it's going to go down, and I'm going to keep it right there at the base of those antlers the whole time it's cooking. And I always add cold water because I don't want it to stay too hot. I can bring the temperature down as I add the cold water, and it keeps it cooking slow and low. It's all about timing, and if you try to rush the process and you cook him too hot and get in a rolling boil, you run the risk of losing your nose pieces, and then you're not going to have a cool looking Euro mount like you want. So remember, slow and low, just wait it out. You really don't have anything to do at this point but keep adding water and monitoring it. Shake it a little bit when you pull him up, shake him a little, see if anything falls off. If your water gets really colored, change it out and just put new water in and let it heat up again and just keep cooking. You really don't have to worry about that, as if you get enough of the hair and stuff off, your water should be okay. It'll get discolored a little bit, but it's not going to be a huge deal. So slow and low, simmer, don't boil. We're cooking the meat to a point of release. We're not boiling the head. So now you just kind of watch some football games and wait till it's time to go to the next step, which we'll show you here in a bit. Okay, so now I've added my heat. A couple of things for you. If you're like me and you hear a guy go slow and low, what the heck does he mean by low? He told me slow is 7 hours, and it may not take that long. Again, you'll be able to tell when the meat is just falling off pretty easy, and you should be able to take it and shake it a little bit. Outside, when it's done, you'll be able to shake it, and the jawbones will probably just fall off. The lower jawbones will just fall off, and then you know it's ready. And so as far as low, if you got a turkey cooker, when you first light that thing, it doesn't like to do low. So you have to turn it up, let it run a high flame. Then once it gets going a little bit, you can adjust it. And so I'll show you the flame. I'll show you right about where I keep it, to where I keep it simmering. And I don't let it, again, it never gets to a boil. So I'm just going to keep saying this. Slow and low. Slow and low. Simmer, don't boil. And then just let it do its thing. And then if you have a power washer, man, as soon as it's done, you hit that thing and again, you just wash it off, and then you'll be ready for the next step, which is basically letting it dry. And so I'll show you all of that throughout, and I'll keep talking to you, but again, it's not real complicated as long as you don't get impatient. So let me show you what the flame looks like. Okay, here is a slow and low flame right here. Now, just for clarification, for those of you, because these things don't have a temperature setting, I can barely hear the gas coming out of this thing. So if you turn it up, you can hear the gas roaring. So I'm going to bring it down. It's really, I take it right about where my turkey cooker will stay on. See, if I take it too low, the flame doesn't want to keep going. So it's about the lowest setting I can keep my cooker on without it going out. Okay, so now you should be at a point where this head is cooked plenty long enough. He's still got some residue around the base of his skull on the top in between his antlers, but I'm going to take all that off with a power washer. I'm going to show you kind of what it should look like when you're finished cooking. And so I'm just going to raise the head up. I should be able to shake it a little bit. The jawbones and stuff should fall back into the pot, and then I'm ready to power wash. See how he's really loose on his jawbones? Just a little shake, boom, there they went off. And so I'll shake it a little more. You see all that meat is done. But back here on the back, this meat is not coming off as easily And that's okay, because I'm going to take it off with the power washer. I'm not going to video the power washing. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just be careful, don't spray too hard. Don't get any spray on the antlers. Go around the antlers, take your time, wash the base of the skull, wash the eyes out. When you wash down in this hole right here, you're gonna get a lot of blowback, so be careful or you're gonna have stuff all over your head, because that's all mushy down in there and it's gonna blow right back out as you shoot back down in. But just take your time, clean him up, and you're ready for the next step of letting him dry. But you can see all the meat has pretty well come off, and I never did get the water to a boil, and I think this one's going to turn out pretty good. Okay, so now we've power washed him and he's fully clean. The meat is off his skull, you can see, out of the inside of his nose chamber. His nose is still attached. It's out of this hole. Sometimes if you're having trouble, if you're doing it by hand and you don't have a power washer, you can take a screwdriver and you can pop these two little chambers out. You ain't gonna hurt anything. Just stick the screwdriver right inside there and pry back, and it'll pop that out and give you a bigger hole to work with. Same thing on the other side. Run a wire up in there and loosen all that stuff out, and just keep putting water in there and shaking it upside down. If you have a power washer, you can knock it all off, no problem. But you can see he's clean, but he's kind of yellowy here. He's kind of got some off color here. And so that's not what we want. But what we're going to do is just let him dry. And so you let him dry completely. If you're in a hurry, you want to speed up the process, you could put a hair dryer on him and blow it real hot. But that's still, like, he's still going to need a minimum of 2 hours. The drier the bone gets, the better, because what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to get the skull really dry to allow the clarifier that we're going to put on in the final step to absorb into the skull. And the longer and the more that it can absorb into the skull, the wider you can get the skull. So you can see this one has been done. You see how wide he is compared to this one that has not. So we're gonna let him dry, and then we'll put the clarifier on there, and I'll show you how to do that. But right now, it's just wait. Just put him somewhere where it's dry. If your wife will let you, put him in the house on top of the one of the air vents, and let the heat blow on him, and just let him dry out and cure really, really good. The drier, the better. So if you can wait, a day, that's great. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one aside, and I'm about to go out to the woods and do some hunting. And when I get back, I'll shoot the final step and show you how to put the clarifier on this thing and get him as wide as you could possibly get him. Okay, so I'm back from hunting, and this thing's pretty dried out. It was still a little bit yellow right here. And so what I do, if there's still a little bit, if I feel like they still got a little moisture in them, I'll take a hair dryer and just get them hot and blow hot air on it. And then you just make sure I'm picking all the meat off, that there's not any little places of meat, getting it all off, and we're ready for our next step. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap, again, the pedestals just a little bit, just a few inches up. You don't have to be real particular with that, but just wrap the pedestals in cellophane, plastic wrap, and that's to keep what we're going to use to dye the skull. That's to keep that from getting on and discoloring the antlers once again. And then we're going to take strips of paper towel. I'm going to wrap this thing completely in paper towel. And the reason we're going to do that is that's going to hold the clarifier that we're going to use, and I'll show you that product here in a moment, but that's going to hold the clarifier onto the skull, because it's basically like water, and we don't want it to just run off. We want to hold it on there in place for a couple hours so we get a good bleaching, because you can tell if you look at this thing real close. I'll hold it up here close. You could tell that he's like around in his nose and stuff like that. It's kind of black. He's not just white everywhere. And so we want to try to get him as white as we possibly can, get a good uniform color so it makes that rack pop off of the skull, and that's what we're after. Okay, so now we got him completely wrapped in paper towels, and the tape is on there. You don't really need a whole lot of tape. The tape is just to hold the paper towel in place, because when you pour the chemical on there, then the paper towel is going to suck up real tight against the skull. And then you just leave it sit and let it bleach for a couple hours. So the product we're going to be using is called, this stuff is called, it's a Soft Swim brand, and it's called Clarifier, or it's a Soft Swim brand, and it's called Clarifier. And I think you can get it Vaquasil. I bought it before. But the thing you want to look is on the back, it'll tell you this stuff is 98% hydrogen peroxide. Okay, so the stuff that we normally use to clean our wounds is 3%. This is 98%. You get it on your fingers, it's going to turn them white. You get it on your clothes, it's turning it white. And so you got to, you want to make sure that you are careful with this stuff. But this is what works the magic. And I just stumbled across this. I found a home brew for scent killer several years ago, and the guy talked about this stuff, and I just tried it on a European mount one time, and it worked great, and I've been using it ever since. You get a gallon of this. I think I've had this for like 3 or 4 years, and so I've still got about that much left. And I don't know how many European mounts I've done for myself and friends. And so it's a really cheap way to go. I like it a lot better than going to the beauty shop. It's easier. And the great thing about this stuff is these heads still have a little bit of a fleshy smell. When you pour this on them, it kills everything. And so they don't smell bad anymore. They're something you can stick in the house and not worry about the smell. So make sure you use safety goggles and some rubber gloves, or be real careful. I will use safety goggles because of the video, and but I'm not going to use I'm not going to use gloves because I'm going to be real careful. Either do this over a sink or do it over a bucket like this right here. If you do it over a bucket, then you can reuse the product on the same mount. I don't pour it back in the jug, but I can reuse it this way. So basically just pour it on the paper towel, and that paper towel will suck and absorb all of it up, and it'll sink right down in onto the skull. And I like to try to get some to go down into that hole in the back of the skull so that it kills any odor that may be in there. And that's it. Now we're just going to let it sit, and it's just going to do its thing. And I had an open cut on my thumb, and I did get just a little bit on there. And it's turning my thumb white. So the stuff is powerful, so be really, really careful. Don't let your kids get around it, and don't let it splash up in your eye. So we'll let it sit a couple hours, and then I'll pull it off, and we'll see what it looks like, see how it turns out. Okay, so the final step is you've let it soak for a couple hours. You just take off the paper towels, see how well it did. So you can see all of that black that was on the side, it's bleached it. And the cool thing about this is now that I've pulled that off, this is going to continue to whiten. As it completely cures out, it'll get whiter. And you can actually add some more to it if you want. You know, if you didn't get as good enough response as you wanted. But that's how I do a European mount. By no means am I an expert. Like I said, I'm just a hunter that developed my own system and kind of accidentally stumbled on the swimming pool clarifier, and it seemed to work a lot better for me, a lot easier for me to use, and it's cheap. I hope the video helped. Thanks for watching, and share some pictures of your mounts if you use anything. And if you have any other tips, you can share them in the comments. I'm always about learning what other guys are doing that's helpful. And I'm certainly no expert, and just enjoy having a little fun out in the woods and doing my own European mounts.